He told me to cut through the wall to escape. I didn't know it was alive. The first thing I knew was the cold. It was a deep, wet cold that had soaked through my bones before I was even awake. My eyes snapped open to darkness. Not total darkness, but the heavy, closed dark of a cellar. I was lying on a concrete floor. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and stale piss. A rough, scratchy cloth like a burlap sack was draped over me. It did nothing to stop the damp from seeping into my skin. In front of me, maybe 20 feet away, a small, perfect square of pale light was cut into the wall near the floor. An exit. My body screamed as I pushed myself onto my hands and knees. Every joint ached with a dull, thrumming pain. I crawled toward that square of light, the grit of the concrete grinding into my palms and kneecaps. The sound started then. A low, rhythmic moaning from somewhere far away, echoing in a way that told me this place was vast. When I reached the opening, I pushed my head through. It was tight, scraping my ears. I was looking into a long, wide corridor, lit by the flickering orange glow of a fire pit far down the hall. The fire seemed to be fed by bundles of rags and splintered wood, and the moaning was louder out here, punctuated by sudden, sharp shrieks that bounced off the stone walls like thrown rocks. I hauled the rest of my body through the hole and stood, unsteady on my feet. I pressed a hand against the wall to steady myself, the stone slick and cold beneath my fingers. I started walking toward the fire, my only landmark in this sprawling tomb. Phantoms flickered at the edges of my vision, gaunt shapes darting between doorways and shadows, too quick to properly see. My hand, tracing the wall, suddenly found nothing. I stumbled, catching myself before I fell into a doorway identical to the one I'd just crawled from. Inside, a man was curled on the floor, his thin chest rising and falling in ragged, desperate gasps. His eyes were wide, fixed on the ceiling. His voice was a dry whisper, a dead leaf skittering across pavement. I only wanted to see the color of God's blood. His words hung in the air, nonsensical and yet filled with a terrifying, absolute conviction. I felt a pull to go to him, to say something, but the reek of sickness and waste pouring from his cell pushed me back. Fear won. I left him to his visions and continued down the hall. The further I went, the more of them I saw. Pale, skeletal figures that moved with a twitching, unnatural energy. Then I heard it. A sound different from the moans and shrieks. A heavy, rhythmic stomp, 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 stomp that grew louder and louder. A man rounded a corner ahead, moving with the force of a locomotive, though he couldn't have weighed more than a child. He was coming right for me. His head was shaved, his eyes were burning coals in a skeletal face, and his right foot slammed into the floor with a percussive fury that seemed to shake the very stone. He didn't slow down. He charged until he was inches from my face, his wild, panting breaths washing over me. The stomping continued, faster now, a frantic, hammering beat. He threw his hands over his eyes, but I could still see them through his fingers, 2 points of brilliant, manic light darting back and forth, scanning every inch of my face as if he was trying to read my soul. The stomping became a blur of motion. Dust and filth kicked up around his bare foot. Then, without warning, he let out a scream that was nothing human, a sound of tearing metal and animal pain. He collapsed. There was a wet, heavy crack, like a thick branch snapping. He lay on the floor, his leg bent at an impossible angle, a shard of white bone piercing the skin of his hip. He didn't seem to care. He just writhed on the floor, howling. I didn't wait. I broke into a run, sprinting away from the screaming man, heading in the direction he had come from. The corridor opened into a room so enormous my mind couldn't grasp its scale. It was a cavernous lobby, stretching into darkness on either side, the ceiling lost in shadow far above. The entire space was filled with a shanty town of crude tents and lean-tos, cobbled together from the same foul rags everyone wore. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and despair. As I walked through the makeshift aisles, voices slithered out from the dark tents. Some were pleading for things I couldn't understand. Some were arguing with phantoms. But one voice cut through the madness, clear and sharp as glass. You, the new one, over here. The voice came from a small, almost solid-looking structure made of salvaged planks and stretched hides. A window had been cut into its side, and in it sat the face of a very old man. His white hair and beard were long and thin, like spider silk. I picked my way toward him, stepping over listless bodies that might have been sleeping or might have been dead. I stopped at his window. "You called me?" I asked. His eyes were pale and watery, but they held a focus I hadn't seen in anyone else. "You have the scent of the outside on you," he rasped. "You are new to the Charnel House." I nodded slowly. Where is this place? A prison. A dumping ground for those whose minds have cracked. They call it the Charnel House. Listen to me. He beckoned with a trembling, skeletal hand. Come inside, quickly. I ducked through the flap door. Inside, a single candle fought against the gloom. He pointed to a small crate. Sit. My name is Zosimus. Time is a luxury we don't have. You want to leave this place, don't you? I just nodded again, my throat too tight to speak. Then listen, and listen well. The path out is not long, but it is vile. Continue through this hall. You will come to a cave. That is the den of the nursed. They will speak to you. They will offer you comfort, secrets, a place at their mother's breast. Do not listen. His eyes glittered. They worship the flesh that grows in that place. The Gorged Mother. They worship the flesh that grows in that place. Do not let them seduce you. Their paradise is damnation. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You must press through their lies. At the back of the cave, you will find the way out. It is a wall of living meat. You must cut your way through. It is the only escape. He reached under his cot and pulled out a long, thin object. He placed it on the crate between us. It was a knife, but the blade was serrated and yellowed, and the handle was smooth and curved. It was a human femur, sharpened to a cruel point. Take this, he said. It will protect your body, but you must protect your own mind. Now go. The hunger will come for you soon. It will tell you to join them. Do not listen. Go. I took the bone knife. It was cold and unnervingly light. Thank you, I managed, and slipped back out into the cacophony of the great hall. I had no reason to trust a mad old man in a madhouse, but he was the only one who had offered me a way out. I walked on, the bone knife clutched in my hand. The hall narrowed again, and soon I saw it. An opening to my left, not of stone, but a dark, wet maw that gaped open. The cave. The moment I stepped toward it, the smell hit me. It was the smell of a slaughterhouse left to rot in the summer sun. I gagged, my stomach heaving, but there was nothing in it to bring up. I covered my mouth and nose with the sleeve of my rag and pushed forward. The air in the cave was warm and humid. The walls weren't stone. They were a deep, marbled red, slick with a greasy fluid, and they pulsed with a slow, steady, rhythmic beat. Like the inside of a heart. It was meat. Living meat. Horror, cold and absolute, washed over me. I looked closer. The fleshy walls were covered in cysts and discolored growths. Strands of dark hair were embedded in the tissue. The entire cave was a single, living, diseased organism. Welcome, lost brother. A calm voice echoed from the pulsating darkness ahead. A man stepped into the faint light filtering in from the hall. He was thin like the others, but his eyes were clear and serene. The mother told us you would come, he said, smiling gently. She is always afraid of newcomers, but you are not a danger, are you? You're just hungry. He was sitting against the flesh wall, humming to himself. Are you trying to get out? I asked, my voice shaking. He chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound that was utterly out of place. Get out? Why would I ever be out of place? Get out? Why would I ever leave? The mother provides. We will never go hungry here. To leave paradise is the ultimate sin. A grim, knowing smile spread across his face. She would never abandon her children, and we, in turn, feed her. I'd had enough. A cold fury burned away some of the fear. What has she done for you? I snarled, my voice echoing off the wet walls. She lets you wallow in this filth, eating her sickness. Do you think a tree cares where its rotten fruit falls? The man's smile vanished. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned his face away, pulling a ragged hood over his head. Die here then, I spat. Die on the floor of your mother's womb. I turned to the wall of flesh at the back of the cave. It writhed and undulated more intensely here. This was the heart of the beast. I raised the sharpened bone. I plunged it into the mass. It was like stabbing a living person. The wall convulsed. A hot, thick liquid, dark as blood, gushed from the wound. I didn't hesitate. Dark as blood gushed from the wound. I began sawing, ripping, tearing at the muscle and gristle. The wall squelched and shuddered, but I didn't stop. I hacked and cleaved until I had carved a hole big enough to squeeze through. I shoved my arm in first. The flesh was hot, slimy, and it contracted around my arm, trying to pull me in or push me out. I got my head and shoulders through. For a terrifying moment, I was stuck, the vile meat pressing in on all sides, suffocating me. With a final, desperate surge of strength, I pulled myself free and fell, gasping, onto cold, clean stone. I was at the bottom of a staircase. The steps were perfectly cut, ascending straight up into darkness. I got to my feet, my body trembling with exhaustion. I placed a foot on the first step. With every step upward, the hunger gnawed at me. A primal, ravenous urge to go back, to take the smiling man's offer, to eat the flesh and finally be full. I thought of Zosimus. I thought of the stomping man. I tightened my grip on the bone knife. I had made my choice. I climbed. Step after agonizing step. And then I saw it. A pinprick of light. It grew larger, brighter, until it was a brilliant white doorway at the top of the stairs. This was it. It was do or die. And when your world shrinks to that single simple choice, there is no room for fear. I took the last step and was consumed by light. The sun felt like a physical blow, a purifying fire on my back. I collapsed forward, not onto stone, but onto something soft and cool. Grass. I pushed myself up and looked around. Rolling green hills stretched to a horizon dotted with lush, dark trees. A wide, glimmering river flowed through the valley below. Fluffy white clouds drifted in a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Without thinking, I tore up a handful of grass and shoved it in my mouth. I chewed and swallowed, the clean, bitter taste an impossible miracle. I scrambled to the river on all fours and plunged my face into the cool, clear water, drinking until my stomach ached. I waded in, scrubbing at the filth that caked my skin, watching it peel away in gray sheets and dissolve in the current. Clean, but not whole, I crawled out of the water and found the shade of a large oak tree. I lay back against its trunk, the rough bark a comforting anchor in this new, terrifyingly beautiful world. I was out. I was free. But as I closed my eyes, the slow, steady pulse of the charnel house still beat behind my eyelids.